Today, the public school systems in our largest cities are in financial trouble, unable to correct a cycle of recurring annual deficits. As a case in point, the San Francisco Unified School District is facing its own budget deficit of approximately $148.5 million within its $1.3 billion budget. A consolidation of schools appears inevitable as student enrollment has declined by 4,000 students since the 2017 school year. So the question is, what is the plan to avoid the impending insolvency, and can the school board redesign the district's school operations? My name is Jim Connor. Welcome to Game Changers Silicon Valley. My guest on this topic is Supryia Ray, an attorney, a parent organizer on school issues, and now a candidate for the San Francisco School Board. Supryia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this burdensome or perhaps intolerable financial situation at the San Francisco School Board. Can you give us a brief overview?
Yes. Unfortunately, the district has been losing students for decades now, and the enrollment is roughly half what it used to be at its highest point. We still have a very large number of schools, though, that is much more commensurate with that high point than it is with the point at which we're at now. So the school district has been spreading its resources too thin, and it is having trouble even staffing classrooms and having the funding in order to pay for all the expenses of the various schools. The school district has also had a long-time habit of overspending its means, and so we have reached the point where we are now under partial state control, where there are financial advisors who can actually veto school board decisions.
Now, I read some articles in the last few days, and it has been what I would say is almost cataclysmic. As I understand, I just want to repeat and make sure I've got this understanding. Student enrollment has been dropping for quite a while, and as you said, it's about half of what it was maybe 20 years ago. Is that accurate?
More than that, more decades than that.
Okay.
Yes.
So the revenues have dropped. The school board has not adjusted the cost of operations, correct?
Broadly, yes.
Yeah,
there
broadly.
were some closures about 20 years ago, but we still have, in terms of a real mismatch between the enrollment of our students and the number of schools that we have. And we are having trouble adequately resourcing all of our students as a result of this issue and as a result of overspending.
The long story short is that now there's an audit that says the school board operations is facing potential bankruptcy or at least insolvency. And now the school board is trying to make decisions of how to consolidate the schools. Now, as I understand it, about a month ago in August, there was an announcement that we're going to tell everybody what schools will be closed and how we're going to deal with this. And that's going to come next week. Is that correct?
Correct. The superintendent will be announcing the administration's proposed list of consolidations, mergers, or co-locations, whatever that may be, on September 18th. We don't know what that list will contain or how many schools it will contain, but there's, of course, a lot of speculation, and when folks don't have information, there's inevitably rumors that go around. So the more the district can do to inform the school community about what their recommendations are and about what their plans are for any schools that they may recommend for closure or co-location or merger, the better.
I'd like to deal a little bit with the underlying causes because they seem to be very prevalent across many cities, many school districts in different cities, and it seemed to be this decline in enrollment is huge. And I've read that the reasons are that COVID really set the schools back and not that many students came back. Maybe they went to alternative schools, but also the issue that parents have been unhappy with some of the curriculum content, the way things were taught in schools, and it was the fact that classes were now conducted on Zoom during the COVID pandemic, and parents saw what was going on. They didn't have that insight before. Is that correct, a valid concern?
Broadly speaking, yes. So many students have continued to flee the district. Many families have continued to flee the district because of the closures. We certainly ourselves, our family knows a number of families that did that. Sent their children to private school or even, moved entirely in order to get them into another public school district elsewhere. So the closures were very detrimental to most students, especially to the most vulnerable students who really rely on schools as places of safety and stability, access to adults and resources, and opportunities. So in terms of the effects of the closures and the reasons, San Francisco actually has a much higher percentage than the rest of the state of kids or families who send their kids out of SFUSD. So in general, the state percentage is about 10% of families go other than to their public school district. In San Francisco, it's 30%. That shows that there's a real difference and a real level of concern that's not just declining birth rates or something else, but a fundamental dissatisfaction with our school system, and that needs to change.
You have a couple purposes, as I understand, because we did talk about that. I want to get into the safety issue also. And as I understand it now, during the day, the parents go to work. What are the kids going to do? They need a safe place, and they need a safe place for most of the day that the parents are at work. How is that being dealt with today?
So what you're describing is absolutely the reality. Kids need a safe place while their parents are at work. And if families and students, and frankly also teachers and staff, don't see their school environment as safe, they are not going to want to come or they're not going to want to stay. So this is an issue that is foundational to absolutely everybody in our school communities. It comes before pretty much anything else. So in order for us to have effective learning and teaching environments, places where everybody is willing to be, we need to make sure that they feel safe in those places. That includes measures like gun safety infrastructure, such as Columbine locks and working PA systems that actually reach throughout an entire school campus. If you only have a system that reaches part of it, what about everybody else who isn't able to be informed about what's going on? We need environmental safety in schools so that people feel they can drink the water and feel that they have adequate ventilation. And we need to make sure that we're preventing and addressing, if incidents occur, incidents of bullying and harassment. When folks don't feel safe, they're not going to want to go to school.
Yeah. Those are big problems. Do you have a comprehensive plan for this?
The school district would have to tackle this issue on so many fronts. And this, to be best addressed, we would need to go school by school and find out what their concerns are. We do already have a facilities master plan where there has been an assessment, a facilities condition assessment done. So we can look at what those assessments have found. Those assessments are now a couple of years old, but they are still providing good basic information about what needs to be done in the school. That said, we must actually talk to the frontline people, the students who are there, the staff who's there, to find out what the current conditions are and what needs to be remedied. Whether it's needles, for instance, littering the campus, which is very, very dangerous, or whether it is an issue with their electrical system, or whether it's an issue with Columbine locks that are there but are broken and haven't been fixed by the maintenance department.
I wasn't going to bring this up, but there is a homeless problem in San Francisco, a very big one. And of course, a drug problem among the homeless. That aside, I have the impression that this rolls over into the school premises, correct? People will be on school grounds using needles, what have you.
Unfortunately, this is the case at a number of schools around San Francisco. It is a very difficult and challenging problem to address. San Francisco is a compassionate city. It is a city that cares about people and wants to help as much as possible. We also need to make sure, though, that we are addressing people's foundational safety concerns, and the community deserves to feel safe. You do not want to have needles, alcohol stashes, broken glass in or around your kid's kindergarten play yard. That's an issue, for instance, at the elementary school where my children went to. And that was so worrisome to families on a daily basis and to staff on a daily basis. Nobody wants to go around and be picking these things up. And frankly, it should not be the case that families and personnel are asked to deal with this.
So I see why San Francisco has this 30% of the families that don't go to the public schools. They have left or gone to other schools. That's
yes,
part of the reason.
Safety is part of the reason that many folks cite as the reason why they don't apply or why they leave.
Then the other big issue is this issue of financial mismanagement, no cost control, payroll system wasn't working. Has this been remedied at this point?
Not yet, but it is in process. So San Francisco Unified School District unfortunately lacks a lot of the basic systems that are needed to make any enterprise run. School districts, like everybody else, and certainly SFUSD, like any other district, needs to have seniority lists. It needs to have position control systems. It should have an enterprise system so that its HR and budget and finance folks can talk to each other and enter data into the system, and that data is available. So it should be able to track its cash flow. These are all basic problems that SFUSD encounters and that the state, for instance, has identified. We need to put those systems in place. The district is in process of replacing the payroll system with an enterprise system now.
So now the state gave a warning over the past couple of years. They put a couple of financial analysts watching the school board, what they're doing. And then this past May, they said, gee, you haven't made enough progress. We're concerned about your impending insolvency. We're going to give these people veto power over anything you spend. I mean, how has that happened so far? Or is that proceeded in a, shall we say, a civil way?
It unfortunately has occurred that the state has exercised its veto authority. This is not something that should have had to happen. If the board and the personnel, the central office administration, were better on top of this, it would never have come up, because we do have fiscal advisors who do give us advice about what to do and who have veto authority. So clearly we need to be coordinating with them and understanding what will and will not be allowed. So this summer, the fiscal advisors vetoed the district's decision to hire 10 assistant principals. Those assistant principals might have been incredibly helpful to student outcomes, to improving the student experience, to running the schools more effectively. And yet we couldn't do that because we didn't appropriately plan for that in advance.
This is a really tough situation. School districts between a rock and a hard place. They've got these overseers, if you will, from the state saying you can't spend more money, and yet there seems to be, as you've expressed, an idea to bring in some new people, new blood, new ideas. Can't spend that money. Is the first step to reduce the existing overhead so there's some room to spend money? Is that the approach?
Well, what we really need to do, because we have limited resources, and I want to note on this front, we actually have quite a lot of resources. We're very fortunate to have generosity, tremendous generosity from the voters of our city, in addition to the funding that we receive from the state. So in many ways, we are in a better position financially than many other school districts. So we can take that money, and if we can learn how to spend it more effectively, if we can have systems that help us to spend that money more effectively and cut out a lot of the waste that exists, we can actually focus our resources on the programs that attract student and families to SFUSD, pay teachers well so they'll want to come and stay, and achieve the results that we want. Now, for instance, the district apparently spends approximately 40% more, for instance, comparatively, on contractors and consultants than others do for the same type of things. Why? This is an area that we can address and improve our spending efficiency.
I just have to ask you this question. What was going on with the school board during that time with these, shall we say, people who were using the school board as a stepping stone to other things? Go spend 4 years there, then move on. Now you've got that on your resume. Or were they just incompetent, or were they politically misoriented?
Those factors come into play for various people. It's unfortunately the case that many candidates have, and many school board commissioners have seen the school board as a stepping stone. Some of those commissioners might nonetheless have been very effective people, but some are primarily focused on what their next step is. That's not necessarily consistent with what is best for the school system, especially if what is best entails making hard, politically unpopular decisions. And then there are folks also, as we saw, for instance, during the pandemic, who seem to be very much ideologically motivated and engaged in a lot of performative projects that did not actually improve matters for students in SFUSD, and in fact, actually harm students, because if you're spending your time on things like renaming schools, then you are not spending your time on getting kids back into those schools.
What did the voters think of this? I mean, Dianne Feinstein School. And, she's very prominent, very well-recognized name.
Absolutely.
I never quite understood that reasoning to take her name off. I don't think she owned any slaves. I don't think she violated any, sexual harassment laws. What was the reason behind that?
In terms of the renaming, whatever one might think of whether renaming was or was not a good idea in general, whether there are schools that should or should not be renamed, the district should not have been focused on that at a time when we had a real crisis on our hands, reopening, getting kids back into schools, which is what people should have been focused on. With respect to Dianne Feinstein specifically, that's a perfect example of somebody who one would think we would want to honor. And the research, if one can call it that went into the materials that were presented to the board and given to the public was shoddy, to say the least. That's the best I can say about it.
So this renaming was done without voter approval, done by the board then, is that correct?
Well, ultimately the renaming did not go through.
Oh, did not.
But the board did vote to rename schools. However, the schools were not, in fact, ultimately renamed.
So now I want to talk a little about your campaign. Here you are, you're an attorney, you're a writer, got a nice lifestyle, you got 2 kids in the public school, you're doing a lot of volunteer work. And I guess it became such a serious point that you decided you had to get involved. You have no political aspirations whatsoever. You just want to help contribute with your attorney skills, legal skills, and your writing and your concern for education to get this turned around. Now, this is a big job. Where do you start? Where do you start?
Ooh, I think that we start with focusing on students. The district should be and says it is student-centered, but too often that has not been the case. We actually need to measure all of our decisions by whether or not they are improving students' experiences and outcomes. That is what the school district is there for. It is to educate students, and we have often lost sight of that. Past boards, past administrations have not used that as their yardstick. Beyond that, we need to make sure that the school district can rebuild trust. There are so many people who don't trust the district. In fact, I think it's fair to say that may be one of the biggest points of commonality is a lack of trust in the district, no matter where people fall on the political spectrum, no matter what their views are on the schools. The district has really squandered an enormous amount of goodwill and trust, and we need to build that back. Then people will want to come if they can see that if the district is competent, if it is capable, and if it is responsive. That will attract people back to our system.
Well, my hat goes off to you for doing this because, like I said, I have the impression it's not a very high-paying job, and you have other things to do, so you have gotten quite a commitment. I just want to ask: is it that this is a personal crusade, if I could use that for you, or are you just saying someone's got to be sane and bring reason, practicality, reason, and financial understanding to the party, if you will?
It's both. I mean, the reason that I got involved beyond my own kids' schools, right, involved district-wide, was with the pandemic and the closures. And I myself come from a background of tremendous childhood trauma and adversity. I have experienced childhood violence, sexual assault. I know what it's like to have a family member with a substance abuse problem. We have dealt with many challenges in our family. And for me, school was a place of safety. It was a refuge, and it was a launching pad. That is how I got to Harvard Law School. I got a good education. I had teachers who cared about me and helped me along the way, staff members who gave me ideas, like going to law school. I got that idea from an administrative assistant at my school. So I know how important schools are for the most vulnerable kids. That is why I became involved initially in district-wide advocacy, was to improve the situation for the most vulnerable kids. And it became apparent to me over time that we needed to help all kids, certainly the most vulnerable, but we should be a city that attracts and a school district that attracts everybody. People can choose not to come, that's fine. But I hope for the school district to be a place that people can be proud of and that is viable and provides everybody with a good education.
And to wrap this up, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your campaign. How is that going? What do you do every day? And what are the most significant challenges for you from a personal, even professional point of view?
The campaign is going really well. I am a grassroots candidate. I come out of the community. I've been interested in politics, as many people are, in terms of following what's going on, but I did not plan to run for office. This was not something I intended to do. And I have found myself doing this because it's so important to me to try to make sure that we make our school system effective for every kid. We need a good public school system in every city. It is foundational to a thriving community and to our democracy, frankly. And so it's very important to me. In terms of how the campaign's going, I have tremendous grassroots support, for which I'm very, very grateful, because of the work that I've been doing with other parents and teachers and education advocates and other community members for the last several years. And that has really powered me through, since I was not originally connected to sort of politicians or to many wealthy donors and so forth. I have been able to come through and gain the endorsement of the Democratic Party, for instance, because I have such strong grassroots support. So we will continue to work to bring our campaign to every voter throughout the city and to try to make sure that we can make it a place everyone's proud of.
Well, that's really an inspirational story you have. I have to admit that when you grow up with adversity and you have violence in your home and you've been subject to drug abuse within the family structure, it gives you a perspective that most people don't have.
Yes.
Who are willing to be on a school board.
Yes, I will specify in that regard. It was alcohol abuse.
Yeah.
But when you have personal experience with real adversity, it gives you a window onto things that I think many folks don't necessarily have. When folks say they're student-centered and they have lots of ideas about what to do, even if well-intentioned, if those ideas don't work out, you need to reverse course. If what you're doing actually harms the people that you say you're trying to help, you need to reverse course, and you need to do a lot sooner and quicker than what we've seen in this current and past school boards. You also should not be putting things in place that don't actually have a reasonable evidentiary basis for thinking they'll work. So we have a duty. We have a duty to our kids, and we have to exercise that responsibly.
Well, very good. I'm very delighted, really, and just pleased to hear this perspective from you. So you've added a great deal of insight for our audience, both here in the Bay Area as well as across the country. So you're running a campaign. Let's take a moment, let you speak to the audience about why you want to be elected or what you will do, and we'll have you speak to this camera right over here, and then we'll come back and close with how people can follow up with you.
Thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My vision for SFUSD is to make it a place where students, families, teachers, and other staff want to come and stay. My vision is for SFUSD to be a place that all school communities can be proud of and that our entire city can be proud of. That is how we achieve great results for students and great results for our city. We want to be sure that folks, every kid in SFUSD has the opportunity to grow and thrive, that every child has the opportunity to find their path, and that path will be different, and that is totally fine. We need to make sure that we give people a wide range of opportunities so that they can see a path forward for them in the future and become the best version of themselves. I am here because I want to help make this vision possible, and the board, as Jim had referenced before, it's not a stepping stone for me. It's the place where I feel I can do the most to help kids in schools. So I very much thank you for your time and consideration, and I would be honored to earn your vote.
Well, very good. And let's let people know if they want to connect to your campaign, be a part of it, volunteer, or make a donation. How would they do that?
Absolutely. You can go to my website, which is rayforboe.com. RAYFORBOE.com.
Well, you've been great. I really enjoyed having you here. I want to wish you every success going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thanks for joining us in this episode. If you gained insights from this conversation, you can share this show with your network and ask them to subscribe. You can view all shows at our website, gamechangers.tv, as well as the podcast at Game Changers Silicon Valley. We look forward to your continued interest in upcoming shows.